This video is sponsored by my day job. All views and opinions are my own. Likes and subs are appreciated, but don't hit the notification button. Does anybody actually even do that? Seems annoying. Don't do that.
Do you feel like Fallout 4 was just missing something? Be it the RPG mechanics that made the other Fallout games, or the heart that went into them? You still kind of cringe whenever someone refers to Todd Howard's now infamous line, "It just works."
All of this just works.
Well, after going over the many lies of Todd again, 16 times the detail,
It allows us to have 16 times the detail.
I wanted to revisit the Outer Worlds in the next-gen upgrade. Is it worth the $10 upgrade? Well, let's get into it. Welcome back to JBG. Today we're going to check out the Outer Worlds Spacer's Choice Edition upgrade.
Remember, Spacer's Choice is a family, so overtime is really family time.
For me, the main draw of the upgrade was the $10 price tag for some adaptive trigger support. I really appreciate the feedback on the triggers for next-gen games. Spoiler warning, there are going to be some early game spoilers ahead, but as usual, I'm not going to spoil the story if you haven't played it yet. These kind of games are definitely worth a blind playthrough for the story alone. Some of this could be considered early game spoilers though, but you kind of have to spoil early game stuff to give honest impressions on anything anyway. So the story starts with you being thawed out of cryo by an eccentric scientist, Phineas Wells. You were aboard the colony ship The Hope that disappeared in transit to the colony systems. Wells tasked you with getting the supplies needed to thaw out the other drifting colonists, and jettisons you down to the first planet you'll see in the Halcyon system. In the process, your pod lands on the captain that Wells hired to assist you, so you basically take over his identity and his ship. As with most RPGs, there's a hurdle in just hopping in and taking off on the new ship. You need a power converter for the ship to operate. You'll get unleashed into intro area to figure out the basic mechanics of the game, and kind of get a feel for the morally gray choices that'll define your time in the game. To get the power converter, you either need to divert power from the town of Edgewater, a production colony that borders on slave labor for the corporations to operate, or a small community that defected from that town to start a life free of corporate rule. There isn't really right or wrong decisions here. The outcomes can vary based on side quests you complete while wandering around the area. This will be the theme for most of the game. There aren't many black or white choices to make, just up to the interpretation of what you deem the best outcomes. The main mechanics of the game are similar to Fallout 3 and, unsurprisingly, New Vegas. Obsidian was creating a spiritual successor to New Vegas with a AA budget here. You have your basic starting skills and traits, like in what we now call the older RPGs. Traits are your normal strength, intelligence, base stats you'd expect. Skills are the same principle with a caveat. You're going to put your starting points in these skills as you gain levels with a slight change to the formula. There's an umbrella system for skills that you put your points under a parent skill. Up to 50, you put a point in the parent skill and increases the child skills. After 50, you build each one individually per point. This gives a boost to early game progression and still leaves some room for late game to diversify your build. To be honest, it's a good idea in theory, but in practice, I maxed out the skills I used first and the rest were spent on leftovers. The Spacer's Choice Edition upped the max skill point level, but I don't see much difference outside of a later max out. You have your normal skills here that you'd expect, your basic guns, medical, sneak type stuff. It's your normal character build mechanics in an RPG. They also incorporated a flaw system like older Fallout games had. Not in the way that you would pick a flaw and get the corresponding perk with it right at the beginning of the character build, more in an organic way as you played. You keep getting your ass kicked by robots? Well, there's a flaw you can choose to accept that gives you a handicap with robots, and you get a payoff of an extra perk point. Here's where I think it falls a bit flat. The perks for the most part are a simple stat boost. They don't go as deep as the Fallout games did. Basically a faster move rate when sneaking, more carrying capacity, health boosts, nothing really game changing, but I can appreciate the effort for the diversity of the builds, even if I think it kind of falls flat. Outside of the normal RPG mechanics of stats and dialogue, there's the combat. I'd actually say it's pretty solid. You're not going to get the Call of Duty levels of FPS responsiveness, but it easily rivals Fallout 4. The stats tie into the damage dealt, but there's a solid shooting mechanic backing it up. You also have the replacement mechanic for VATS here, in the time dilation. Gives you the time to line up shots in a slowed real time. You also have your party abilities tied to direct commands too. These are essentially special attacks that your party members do for added damage. They're different for each party member, and although useful, the cinematics get old really fast, almost immediately. You can turn this off though, so you can keep the power attacks and not slow the flow of combat. The party members here are kind of what you would expect. I can't praise this area too much, but I still think they did a decent job. They're all likable and have their standard type party quest lines that you can go on with party members, just like in most RPGs. Some are better than others. For the most part, I'd say the party members and their associated quest lines are pretty good. Not as good as all the hype, but definitely not as bad as the haters made them out to be either. This isn't an open world either. I guess it would be considered a semi-open world. Your main hub is your ship, you select drop locations from a mini-map. Each location varies in size. Some are big enough to have their own fast travel points. Most aren't exactly small areas, but they're also not even close to a fully open world. I enjoyed this aspect also, though. It was nice to have localized locations to explore as opposed to the more common huge open worlds. This will also be another issue that'll be up for each person's preferences, though. My biggest draw to the Outer Worlds was the humor and the tone of the game.
Please return any misappropriated equipment and exit this vessel in an orderly fashion. Failure to do so will result in your immediate destruction. Jettison procedures initiated. Disengaging airlocks. Preparing to eject all boarding parties in 5, 4. You are still here. My deception protocols have failed.
If you're a fan of New Vegas and how there weren't always black and white decisions, and enjoyed how out of left field some things would end up, you might really like this game. There are very few choices presented that are good or bad type option. More just a what do you feel like doing? And with the dark humor tone, you're always guaranteed to get a funny result, even if you thought you were doing the right thing. This has a very similar tone to New Vegas in the writing, and that's the strongest point going for it. On the other hand, there was a lot of griping about the length. The first time I played through, I did almost everything. I clocked in just under 40 hours. That might seem like a ripoff to people who want hundreds of hours of repetition and bloat with their full game prices, and I can't necessarily fault anyone for that. On the other hand, I really liked that it was shorter and to the point. I never felt like any of it was focused on extending the playtime just to hit a market standard length. In fact, I liked that it wasn't something I would never have the time to finish. Looking at you, Valhalla. It hit a sweet spot of length, without any bloat, and full of interesting content throughout. When I hit the end cards, you'll know what I mean if you played the PS3 era Fallouts, I immediately started a new run just to see the different outcomes right from the gate. I don't remember another modern game I restarted right when I finished it if it wasn't part of the main game mechanics. There's no new game plus here, it's just a legit start over. But let's get to the elephant in the room. Is Spacer's Choice Edition worth it? Well, kind of. It really depends. If you're a fan of Fallout 3 or New Vegas, I'd recommend going straight in for Spacer's Choice Edition. It's the next gen upgrade to the 60 FPS and has all the DLC. If you were kind of meh on Fallout, I'd say give the basic version a shot first and then decide if you want to spend the extra money to upgrade it. I don't honestly think the next gen portion is worth much. For PS5, the adaptive trigger support was really intermittent. It was cool while it was working, but you almost forgot about it because it was just randomly show up and disappears again. As far as the FPS, well, I didn't have as many problems with stability and frame rate as a lot of people did, but I also only noticed the upgrade when I was specifically paying attention to the frame rate. This might be due to me going back and playing PS3 games all the time on a regular basis, but I don't know that the FPS upgrade would have sold it for me. It's really going to be a hit or miss here depending on the person. With Microsoft owning Obsidian now, I'd probably tell Xbox players, check it out on Game Pass first. In the end, it really does come down to what you're looking to play. The Outer Worlds presents a palatable size with some great dark humor, and you can feel the love that went into this game. It's going to be on the shorter side compared to a lot of AAA games, but it has an immediate replayability that you don't see too often in the AAA space either. For me, it can't beat New Vegas. Doubt anything can. But it was a great spiritual successor for what I think is a modern masterpiece in media. With a number 2 in the works over at Obsidian, I'm not saying it'll get me to buy an Xbox, but it will be one of the factors if I decide to go to the dark side. Have you played the Outer Worlds? And were you on the fence about the Spacer's Choice Edition? Have you played the DLC yet? If you're looking to play the DLC, I'd probably say just give it a go and get the Spacer's Choice Edition. If you were kind of meh on your playthrough of the Outer Worlds, I think this one might be a pass for you. It's just going to be more Outer Worlds. It really just comes down to the person. If you liked Fallout New Vegas, I would suggest getting the Spacer's Choice just to get the DLC bundle. Until next time.
What? Toodaloo, motherfucker. Hey.